Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Let's implement the reusable components of our application, and we have to maintain basically the same visual as the Kotlin version and the Vuetify application. We're going to do this as best as we possibly can. Under CoreUI, a new folder, let's call it components. And for today's video, we're going to implement the image and the network carousel modal or the dialogues and the typing text. This is basically the scope of today's tutorial. Let's create here a new folder. I'm gonna call it image. And let's go ahead and create a new file from template, a SwiftUI view. Let's call it network image. We need in this particular component a URL. We need some fade-in animation. Let's add an accessibility identifier for testing purposes. Let's define the components for error placeholder as well as the load-in placeholder. In order to do that, first of all, it has to be public because it should be accessible from outside the module. And we have to add here a types parameter. Let's call it for loading indicator as well as the error loading view of type, and another one for error view. Those are types. And here we're going to add error placeholder of type error view and another one for loading placeholder of type loading view. And let's add here an internal state to control whether the URL or the image is loaded or not. Let's define the initializer for this particular component. As a default value, it has to be false. And let's make those parameters optional. A view builder, if you want to add, for example, some if-else statement, it should be an escaping function that has to give us the value of type error view. And as I said before, let's make it optional, empty view by default. With the same manner, here it should be error placeholder with parentheses. This component is going to use the async image component from SwiftUI, and we have to provide the URL of type URL. And we can access the phases of the loading state. First of all, we don't need actually the preview. Now we have to switch over the different phases. In case of empty, we're going to show the progress indicator. And the progress indicator has an empty value or as an empty view. If the loading view or the loading placeholder is empty view, otherwise, if it is empty view, we're going to add here a progress view. Otherwise, we're going to do the loading placeholder. In success state, what we're going to do here, we're going to use the image. It has to be resizable. We're going to set is loaded to true. We're going to change the value is loaded by animation, ease in. And we have to change here is loaded to true by using the animation. And here we're going to add the opacity 1. If it's loaded, it has to be 1 and 0. Make it null. I'm going to provide here the accessibility identifier. If it's null, string of the absolute URL. In case of failure, what's going to be shown here by default? Error placeholder. In case we have provided the placeholder, we're going to show it here by doing error placeholder. If we want to show the default placeholder, mark circle image, showing the error as well as a text. And for the default one, because we have provided failure, empty view. And that's pretty much it for the image or network image. The next component will be the network carousel. As a parameter or as dependencies for this network carousel, we need the list of URLs. We need the timeout to be customizable, and a corner radius of the entire component. The initializer, if you do remember, under the Jetpack Compose application, we have set the autoplay, auto switching of the images. The value of autoplay should be pretty much a private state. Let's initialize this autoplay. In order to allow this autoplay feature, we need a timer. Now we need to initialize the timer and publish. For the time interval, it's gonna be the timeout on main and common. This whole component is gonna be just a simple wrapper around the tab view, and we have to provide here the selected item. Let's come back here and add another internal state. Let's call it selection. By default, it has to be 0. Now, because this parameter is a binding, we have to do selection. We have to add the $sign. Basically, binding is to allow the change back and forth from the view and the state. Now we have to show the list of images by doing for each the list of URL by doing enumerated And let's assign the ID. The ID in this case is gonna be the element. And we have here the index as well as the URL. Now we can use the network image because the type view is not meant only for network image. You can put any component here. Here we have to pass the URL and we have to assign here the ID to force the re-render for the new image. And the ID, it's gonna be the URL because it's unique. Let's add here the aspect ratio to fill and to clip the shape according to the rounded corners. And we have to add here a tag as the index. We have to specify here the index view style, page, background display mode, and we have to pass here always. If it's autoplay, we're going to start the timer. And we have to store the subscription under cancellables. Let's go ahead and add another state, timer subscription of type cancelable. And we have to call timer and connect to start the timer. Now we need to do some cleanups here. On disappear, we need to cancel the subscription. Now on receive, we need to change the index. After the timeout, we need to switch to the other image. We don't need this parameter. We're gonna omit this parameter and I'm going to do it with animation. So the transition is gonna look smoother. The selection is gonna be changed to the old selection +1, the reminder of the division of selection +1, and URL count. So basically this expression is going to goes back whenever we are reaching the end of the list. We're going to go back to the initial page, which is 0. Now let's implement the dialog as reusable as possible as a modifier or a custom modifier. Let's create a new file. Let's call it modal modifier. It's gonna be a public struct, modal modifier of type view modifier. Basically, it's going to be a wrapper around the parent section of our application in order to contain the entire screen. And we have to override this function, body and content. I'm gonna add here a Z stack, whatever content we want. We have to show over the content, the modal or the dialog. So before moving forward, I would like to add a controller, in other words, a view model to control certain aspects of this particular modal. More specifically, the states of is presented in other states. Inside modal, create modal controller. It has to be public, is presented of type boolean equal false as an initial value. And I would like to control the content of this modal dynamically. Content builder, it's going to be optional. And I would like to add a function that's going to show any certain content in this particular dialog. Let's call this function show. It has a generic parameter of type content. The content is basically a view builder, an escaping function, and it has to return a content of type view. Assign the content builder as an initial value, any view, and I have to pass here the content because we need actually to do the conversion from the content view to any view. Is presented equal true. We're going to assign the content dynamically and we're going to show the modal. But I want here to be shown with animation. Therefore, I'm gonna wrap it with animation. And let's specify here the duration. Let's do is ease in out 0.3 seconds, and you can customize it if you will under the initializer, but for simplicity purposes, I'm gonna keep it this way. And I will show the modal or the dialog. Dismissing the modal, I'm gonna call it dismiss. With the same manner, we're going to close the modal or to hide the modal with an animation. And for this content builder, it should be null. Now let's come back to the modal modifier. And in Swift, to inject the view model, we have to do environment object. And we have to provide the environment object somewhere in our application to initialize and create the objects. If you don't do that, the application is gonna crash. Let's call it modal controller is presented. And because the content of the modal is a nullable value, we have to do here another lit to store the non-null value under the modal. Let's call it, for example, modal content equal modal controller and the content. I think that we haven't added here. Computed property, the content of type any view, it is nullable. It should be the content builder, null safety operator. I'm going to add here a backdrop filter. basically over the entire stack. In a practical example in our application, it is basically the layout. So over the layout, translucent background, let's choose the color black and let's add to it some opacity 0.4. And for the transition and the index, you can do here a higher index, for example, 100 or 999 or whatever you want. The most important thing here is it should be the higher index to be at the top. Now we need to place the content, model content, and we have to add the background. Now we are handling basically the content of our dialog theme, and the background should be background. And for the corner radius from theme, I'm going to apply here a shadow, some padding. Now for the Z index, it should be higher than this one, 101. And for the transition, scale, and with combination, opacity. Now Z stack, I'm going to add here the animation, or to define the animation, it's easy and out. And for the value that's going to control the animation, which is the modal controller, and is presented. Gonna add an extension on view. It's gonna be a public function. Let's call it modal host, where this component is gonna be applicable under the tree of our view. Here it has to be as a return type, sum and view. And how to use it, we're going to do self and modifier. And we have to pass the modifier that we have just created, modal modifier. And by defining this, I'm gonna create here just a simple structure to understand where we are going with this structure. And let's say, for example, application. For example, this is the layout, and we want to attach to this layout, which has, let's say, VStack or scrollable area, home screen or whatever. We want to attach to this layout the modal. Basically, it has to be at the top of the modal. If you have attached this modal somewhere in your app, it's going to occupy only the region where it has been defined. But if you have attached to the parent component, it's going to occupy the entire screen. And let's say in our app we have layout. We can do modal host. When doing this, it's going to be basically occupying the entire thing under the layout. And it's going to be, again, the same idea with snack bar controller. When we're going to define the snack bar under modal, I'm going to create here a preview. It consists of basically a form that has a text. It's going to be a text and a text field and a button. And the preview itself, it consists of, now we are defining basically the modal controller. This is basically the top of our application. Once clicking on show form, it's going to cover everything around this particular section. We have to provide the controller, or to provide the instance of the modal controller. Now let's see the preview. In order to see the preview, we need actually to refresh, switch back to CoreUI. Let's click on show form. You have to add ignore safe area. As you can see here, once adding to the modifier ignores safe area, it's going to cover the entire phone screen, including this top bar and the bottom section of the phone, I think. So let's click on show form. We can basically change the text here, and if we click on register, this is going to change from login to register, and we can submit. Form is going to close for us the form, and you can see the animation. Basically, it is a scale animation. I'm happy with the implementation, actually. That's basically it for this component. Now for the last component that we have to do under this video is the typing text. If you do remember, we have implemented this under Vuetify application as well as Kotlin. Let's do that for SwiftUI. Initially, I'm going to comment this. Let's come back to it later on. For the dependencies, as we have done in Kotlin application, we need the text and we need the typing speed, unassigned integer 64. And we have to add here an internal state that's going to hold for us the typed value or the typed text. I'm going to call it displayed text, and let's create the initializer. I think by default, I'm going to add here some default values. For the typing speed, we have to do 3 zeros and other 3 zeros. Let's add here the display text. And whenever this component is ready, because we are going to delay the operation by a certain timeout, I'm going to wrap the whole thing under task to handle the async operation. And I'm going to loop over the list of characters. For each character, I'm going to append the displayed character under displayed text. I have to convert it to string actually because it's a character. Next, I'm going to delay the operation to make the typing by doing try, await, sleep, typing speed as an argument. You can opt in dispatch queue and main and async after if you don't want to do this, but I prefer to use task and await. And that's all we have to do. This is a very simple implementation. Now let's create a simple preview for this component. Let's provide here the text. You can see already the typing text under the preview. I think it looks good. Let's customize this a little bit. Let's add the font, line spacing. Let's align everything in the center, and let's add some padding. As you can see here, we're going to benefit from the properties that are defined by default in the text component. Because this is just a wrapper around text components. So whatever we're gonna do at the trailing, it's gonna be for the text. Foreground color. And you can see here, even we can apply the foreground color here. So that's good. I'm gonna delete this. And that's pretty much it for today's video. For the next video, we're going to implement the snack bar message as well as the discount animation. Basically, you're gonna use the Looty or .Looty animation to implement the discount animation as well as the page 401. I hope you have learned something new. See you in the next one, and happy coding.